Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. Today I want to bring you guys another Last Epoch build, and it is the Void Spellblade. Give you guys a little bit of a gameplay demo here from one of my VODs, just so you kind of know how it works. It is the glazed donut build. As far as my chat was concerned. It is overall a pretty successful build as far as Spellblades go, but I must warn you that in terms of the best possible build played by every single class, I do think that Spellblade possibly might be the worst class in the game. I know Forge Guard is like the meme worst class in the game, and that's true if you're actually using the Forge Guard skills, but Forge Guard has access to both Paladin and Void Knight skills and passives, and the best Forge Knight build probably doesn't have any points in Forge Guard, but the potential to make a good character out of a Forge Guard is there because both Paladin and Void Knight are extremely strong classes. Now, while you might be able to do something similar with Spellblade because both Rune Master and Sorcerer are pretty strong classes, Spellblade, if you're still playing it as a Spellblade, is among the weaker classes without any doubt. So, what are some of the mechanics going on here? So basically, you get a Spellblade and you get some fire auras from attacking, from surging, and they stack up. These are the fire auras there, and the fire auras can do quite a bit of damage, and they can also freeze. This is like a super high attack speed spammy build, and the ward numbers get pretty high, but the health bar that you start with is fairly low. The Spellblade offers a very unique playstyle, and honestly, I kinda like it a lot. The character that I have in the game is what I'll be highlighting. There is a planner with more ideal gear, but overall I've actually had some of the main pieces. Now, Spellblade, along with the other mage classes, they generally do pretty well with elemental-based damage. Most of their passives are for elemental-based damage, and all of their skills are for elemental-based damage. So this is a Void Spellblade. So why are we playing Void? The inspiration for this character came to me from this body armor. This is a 50% drop rate from one of the monolith bosses, so it's extremely easy to acquire, and it combines with the use of this exact weapon, which is the Shadow Beacon weapon, which is one of the most common two-handed maces. I believe it's 1 in 4 if you use the make an item unique rune, and it's extremely high chance of potential. I believe 1 in 3 has at least 1 potential, which means that if you have the double chance of legendary potential through the Circle of Fortune, almost every single one will have at least 1 legendary potential. The melee attack speed roll is extremely important on the Shadow Beacon, but also Shadow Beacon has some pretty wide range for rolls. But again, super common items. Siphon and Anguish is just a good item for any melee-based build because you get a chance to get Doom, and Doom, while it does some minimal damage over time, it stacks, I believe, to 4 and gives you like 4 or 5% more melee damage taken. And this character combines both melee and spells, and I'll kind of go over the setup. But the idea is that this chest gives increased void damage per fire aura, and I thought I could make a character that could get like, 60 fire auras, and if I could get like 60 fire auras, that would be like 3,000% void damage. But while Spellblade is the best class to get fire auras on, well, there's not much void damage, which is why we use this exact weapon, and it's a pretty good demonstration of how mechanics work in this game. So a lot of damage in this game is adaptive. So if you get like a wand or a staff, it will just say spell damage. Now, if you have like spell damage and then you use like a fire spell, that spell damage becomes fire spell damage. Or if you use a cold spell, that spell damage becomes cold spell damage. It's adaptive. It adapts to the typing of the skill or the base damage of the skill. Now, there are other sources of spell damage, and that is spell damage that is specific to the item. Now, this type of attribute is actually pretty rare. It's on very few items, but one of them is the Shadow Beacon. Another way to play this build is with 2 Blades of the Forgotten Knight, which also has spell void damage. Because it specifies spell void damage, this is not adaptive damage, and the Shadow Beacon also has melee void damage. Now, the top roll on the base item, it says melee damage. So melee damage is actually going to change. So if we use Mana Strike, which is lightning, that 106 melee damage at the very top of the item there, that will become lightning damage. But the melee void damage will remain void, and the spell void damage will buff our spells, that will remain void. So my idea was we use this exact item, which has lots of melee void and lots of spell void. We get every source of fire auras to get like an insane amount of void percent damage per fire aura. And well, in that way, we can use just the best melee skills and the best spells available to a Spellblade and not actually care about the scaling of any one element, because this item combo should take care of the scaling and it'll be void, which is pretty cool and unique. And overall, the character plays like this. You Mana Strike constantly, it gives you tons of ward, and the reason it does that is because it spends mana with lightning at positive mana. It costs 15 mana. It gets reduced to, I don't know what that is, like 9. But Mana Strike itself gives a lot of mana. We do want a surplus with Mana Strike because some of the other skills cost mana. So we Mana Strike, we Surge on cooldown. When Surge is on cooldown, it gets like a stack that builds up. We spec-in it fully up to 10, and then it does more damage per stack when we use Surge. Now, these stacks only build up when Surge is on cooldown and you hit with another melee attack. So that's why it's really important to get very high attack speed with Mana Strike. That's why it's really important to get a low cooldown with Surge, because these stacks, when we expend them, we get ward per stack. Spellblade has a lot of mechanics that kind of give you a little bit of ward here, a little bit of ward there, but it does add up. It actually adds up to quite a lot of ward overall. More importantly, we get 1 fire aura per stack. So when Surge is on cooldown, we attack 10 times, then we use Surge. That's 10 stacks of Fire Aura. That's 10 stacks of Fire Aura. That's 10 stacks of Fire Aura. And if you're just like full DPS uptime, you're going to get about 40 stacks of Fire Aura, which sounds pretty good, but I was expecting a lot more than that. Just to quickly go over the skills otherwise, we use Enchant Weapon, which gives just a little bit of melee shock chance. While we do a lot of Void, the remaining damage that we do is largely melee lightning, and Frostclaw is cold, but Frostclaw is mostly a support skill. Go over that. So shock that you apply from the Enchant Weapon will give you increased lightning damage to the target, as well as some stun modifiers, which are pretty interesting. And then the Zap, which is what you're seeing there, it helps just do a little bit of damage. Now, no one skill on this character does like an insane amount of damage. I mean, Surge does quite a lot, but it's just lots of hits, lots of small sources of damage, lots of procced attacks, and it's just like throwing the wave of this like melee and spell combination at your opponent. We have Flame Ward, which is pretty typical for the mage class, an incredibly powerful defensive cooldown. It's spec'd a little bit differently than other characters because we want to get a fire aura when we use it, and this Eye of the Flame, which increases the fire aura damage by 15% multiplier, affects all the fire auras that are applied from any source. So that's why we do that. Oh, and there is another aspect to it. So we can convert the damage of Flame Ward, which also converts the damage of Fire Aura, into cold. Now, the fire aura baseline doesn't really do anything. You can convert it to lightning from here or the passive tree. If you convert it to lightning, it'll effectively do more damage because the shock ailment basically lowers the lightning resist of the target. So if you're using lightning skills, you're probably shocking. But the damage that the fire aura does is fairly minimal, even though it's kind of like the Righteous Fire playstyle. It is that for like crappy mobs, but for like actual rares and bosses, the damage is pretty minimal. But the main thing that is interesting from the cold converted fire aura is that it has a freeze rate of 48. 48 for a freeze rate for a skill is actually really high. Most skills are like 20s, 30s, very few 40s, and maybe there's like one or two skills out there that are like 50 or 60. So 48 per fire aura, but if we have 40 fire auras, each one has every tick, every second, a freeze rate of 48. So we do actually freeze a number of targets. It's not like a super consistent defensive layer, but we do freeze some targets. We also have the Shadow Beacon, which has some really powerful stun modifiers, and we also can get the increased stun chance from the Blessing of Waves. Now, I was just kind of playing around with this, but it seems like I was actually stunning a lot. The defensive layers of this character are, well, against bosses, we negate a lot of hits because we have a pretty large ward pool if we're not getting hit frequently, but when we're clearing monoliths, the defensive layers are, well, we just stun and freeze stuff constantly. So even though there's lots of things that can hit us repeatedly, typically they're kind of crowd controlled through these melee fast hitting mechanics. So overall, it's pretty good. It's not too bad. We also have Frostclaw. Frostclaw has this thing where it's chance to cast on melee hit, and there has some like mana return on cast, so 24% chance to give us 12 mana back. Some people use Frostclaw with these like extra swirls. I found that their damage doesn't actually connect single target very well, and AoE we don't really have any kind of damage issues. So for single target, I think it's just like a 1-point wonder. We get a bunch of spell damage added from the melee damage. We get a cleanse for 2, and all projectiles hitting the same target actually does help single target quite a bit, and we get ward per freeze multi. So that's kind of the character. Overall, it does pretty well. We use a lot of melee attacks, and we use a lot of crowd control, and we use a lot of fire auras. But the main shortcoming of this character is that the passives didn't really work as I expected them to, namely this node. So there are a couple of sources that Spellblade has for fire auras. The other two mage classes can get these, but this one is exclusive to Spellblade, and there is a ward per second per fire aura, which is also exclusive to Spellblade, which is like pretty good, by the way. Like that's kind of a lot. So this node here is anytime you use a melee attack and hit at least one enemy, you have a chance 20% to get a fire aura. And that's pretty good because we attack like 4 times per second, so we're getting, about almost 1 fire aura per second from this 20% chance. Now we have this node here, and if we max it, it's 80%. And it reads, each second if you are moving or using a melee attack, you have a chance for a fire aura, and it's doubled if you don't have one. So basically, when I designed this character, I thought that, oh, that's a pretty cool mechanic. So you get this 80 and you get this 20, and basically, if you're moving, it's only like 1 fire aura a second, but then if you're attacking constantly, you can get like 4 or 5 fire auras per second from just stacking attack speed with your melee attacks, which gives you the void auras, which is like crazy damage scaling. So wow, this actually seems like a pretty good character, right? Well, this node is so bad that it is hard to justify even on a character that scales the entirety of its damage based on the count of fire auras. Even with that character, this node sucks. So why does it suck? How does it work? So actually, each second applies to using melee attacks. What this means is if you have full 8 points in here, if you're meleeing the same target for a full second continuously, then you have 80% chance for a single fire aura. That's right. The moving and meleeing, they're kind of combined 80% chance per second. not per attack, per second. So you can't really scale your attack speed to get fire auras with this, and it's basically why this character has like a max of like 40 fire auras instead of what I expected to be like a minimum of 60, and hopefully a lot more than 60. Now, because we have half as many fire auras, we have about half as much void damage as I expected to have, but the fire auras also do quite a bit of damage. So basically, because that node is like bugged or broken or just like really needs to be buffed, this character is quite underperforming compared to how the build I feel should have worked. Now, it's still a pretty good character, but Spellblade isn't really the best of characters to start with, so it's not really a build I can highly recommend like my other Last Epoch build guides, but I thought to show you guys kind of the journey with this character, because it's still a very unique character. No one else is making Void Spellblades, no one is making Fire Aura builds, and it seems like that is for good reason. But if they ever fix this node to where it works like this one, this exact build should be a pretty good template to get you started, because I feel like compared to my other characters, the damage on this character is actually lacking a little bit. But you know, if we double or triple the damage of this character, I think this character is fantastic. So that's where we're at. Hope you guys enjoyed the journey on the Spellblade, and we'll see you next time.